We're visiting with Tom Nichols, the station manager for KVRE.
Right. My wife and I own the station.
Very good.
It's a family-owned operation.
Family-owned operation. Your wife and you own it, and you have also been in the Hot Springs area, the greater Hot Springs area, for how long?
In broadcasting?
Well, how long?
Well, I've been in Hot Springs all my life. I'm a native, but I've been in broadcasting for 56 years.
Wow.
Started in high school.
So you're thinking you might stick with it then?
I'm trying to get it right. Started in high school on the distributive education program, which was a great program. I wish they would bring it back.
And what did that entail? What did you do?
That entailed when you were a senior in high school, you went to school in the morning for academic credit, and in the afternoon they would place students in various businesses around town. In my case, it was at KWFC, a radio station, and then later KBLO. But they would work at Rapan's department store, J.C. Penney's, all over the area.
Well, very good. Well, the owner of Hot Springs Daily, the online news service, Jerry Neal, had visited with you not long ago, and he was quite interested in apparently some things you told him about a local interesting person, Dewey Smith, who had Town Talk Barbecue in the heart of Hot Springs for many years, and he was a friend to you.
He was
a client.
Yes,
a radio advertising client.
Yes, he was.
And you were a client of his, buying his barbecue ribs in particular.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I grew up in Hot Springs in the 40s, early 50s, and my dad would occasionally buy barbecued ribs, so I was familiar with the product. And then when I came back to Hot Springs in 1964, I'd worked at various radio stations in Arkansas, but came back in '64 working for KZNG as an on-the-air personality and a salesperson. So I went by and made contact with Dewey Smith, sold him some advertising, and we became friends.
I talked yesterday with another one of his customers, a man named Albert Harris. His father was Albert Harris also, and so was his grandfather. And they had the Harris Funeral Home just a couple of houses, a very short distance down the block from him toward the convention center. And he told about when he was a boy, they'd be working. His father and grandfather would be working. We'd send him out frequently to go down and get some plates of barbecue ribs to bring back, with especially like the beans, he said. Yeah. The beans and the barbecued ribs were his specialty. And also he mentioned the potato salad, which they made themselves, and he thought was especially good potato salad. So. Yeah. Do you have any memories of potato salad?
I enjoyed it all, but especially the barbecued ribs, because that was his specialty. He was very proud of those, and he cooked them personally all those years.
And do you know what years he was in business?
He started in the late 1920s. As he and I became friends, he told me something about his history. He was one of the leading black businessmen in Hot Springs. He arrived in Hot Springs from Hope, Arkansas. He grew up in Hope. He was the son of a slave raised by white people in Hope. And he migrated to Hot Springs sometime in the 1920s and started barbecuing, I guess, probably in his backyard. And there was a Jewish merchant in Hot Springs whose name escapes me, but he started buying his barbecue and was impressed with it, and he offered to help Dewey out. So he financed the first Town Talk barbecue at Gulf and Pleasant, gave him the seed money. I guess they built the building and so forth. And that's where he started, and it grew from there. And it hit its probably its peak during the war years. They added a dining room to it. And in those years, the dining room was for whites only. It was right.
Wow. You
walked into the Town Talk barbecue. There was a lunch counter in the main part and some booths over against the wall. And when the town was open with gaming, there was a slot machine in the corner. And then on the other side of the building was the white dining room with a special entrance for the whites to come in, and his prime clients in those years were soldiers from the Army Navy Hospital. So that room had an interesting history too.
Well, that Jewish benefactor, I guess, was especially appreciative that I guess Dewey was able to put some special sauce on those ribs and
Yeah.
turn them
Yeah,
kosher.
he had a secret sauce. Nobody ever knew what was in the sauce.
But
And that was his. That became his slogan. It's the sauce that makes the difference.
Yeah.
And it's true, because the barbecue ribs were just outstanding.
Well,
And he took that secret to his grave, by the way.
Well, it's this kind of a sad thing I went yesterday and looked, and the site has been cleaned to the dirt, and the building's all gone, and so that piece of history in Garland County and Hot Springs is not visible anymore, except as a vacant lot.
Yeah, the city really needs to put up a plaque there to honor his memory, because it is a historic part of the black history of Hot Springs. And at one time, in addition to Town Talk Barbecue, that was Town Talk #1, he also had a Town Talk #2 on Malvern Avenue, when there were a number of black businesses on Malvern Avenue. It was quite a business section at that time.
Wow.
There was some sauce in plastic bottles, I believe.
Yeah, that was one of the stories. Dewey always put his sauce up in glass bottles. And as we became friends, we had a special deal we did. Dewey never liked to run up an advertising bill. And we made an exception in his case. He always liked to pay his advertising bill by the week. So I would create a statement, and usually on Monday, late in the morning, early in the afternoon, I'd go by Town Talk, and he'd take me over to his dining room. We'd sit down and visit, and he'd pay in cash every week. And one week, he gave me some barbecue sauce as a gift, because he knew I loved his barbecue, and he just put it in plastic bottles. Always had it in glass bottles before. So I took it home, and we stored it under the counter. And about a week or so later, in the middle of the night, my wife and I kept hearing this thumping sound coming from somewhere. And, it would start and then it would stop in the middle of the night. We'd go in there and look, we couldn't find it. So finally one night it became even louder, and we looked under the kitchen cabinets where we had the barbecue sauce stored in the containers, and they were actually oscillating like a pair of lungs going back and forth. Whatever he used in the barbecue sauce had caused a chemical reaction with that plastic. So when I went back the next week, I said, Dewey, you've got to go back to glass bottles. It's going to explode.
Well, and it wasn't a poltergeist after all.
No, it wasn't. But we'd always talk about, on Monday, he was a great baseball fan. We'd talk about baseball, and we'd talk about the fights. Boxing was still popular in those years, and we'd talk about the great heavyweights and the middleweight fights coming up, and just became good friends. And I always admired him because he's a perfect example of how the free enterprise system can work in this country when you get the government out of it. Because he built the business on his own, became a wealthy man because of it. And he was probably one of the first in Hot Springs to offer door-to-door service. For a time you could call and he would have delivery service. His wife would, and some others would deliver the barbecue. You could call up and they'd deliver it to your house. Very innovative.
So his business closed, you said what year?
I'm not sure of the year. He operated it until he couldn't do it anymore. It was well up in years. But I became the spokesman on radio for Town Talk
Sometime
Barbecue.
in the 80s?
80s or possibly the early 90s. You'd have to look up his death date, but it operated until just before his death.
And he had children? No children to take up the business?
He had children, and they left. He had a daughter that married a car executive at General Motors in Detroit. And they liked the barbecue, and Dewey set them up with the Town Talk Barbecue in Detroit, which was very successful. He gave them the formula for the product, and it went over so well that the son-in-law quit his job as a General Motors executive to run the barbecue place.
Wow, I wonder if that's still in
I don't know.
operation.
I don't know. But for almost 20 years, I was the radio spokesman for Town Talk Barbecue. And we always ended the commercials with, "It's the sauce that makes the difference." And it did.
Was it a vinegar-based, tomato vinegar-based
No one ever knew.
taste?
No one ever knew.
Okay. But it was evidently very tasty.
It was. It was.
Memorable.
Yeah. In fact, my wife and I would have his barbecued ribs every anniversary. That was a treat for us.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you telling us about this interesting character in Hot Springs history, and wish you a great rest of the day.
Well, thank you.